I'd like to thank Torah Anytime and Chazaq for making this tefillah program available to Klal Yisrael. Last week we spoke about the emunah level that Noach HaTzadik had. Rashi said Noach was Miktani Amana, Maimin Ve'ena. That cryptic language was difficult to understand. The Stipler helped us out. Stipler explained that what Rashi is really referring to is the fact that Noach HaTzadik had a level of emunah which is not the most qualitative level. That was an emunah sichli. It's an intellectual, theoretical understanding of the fact that God exists. However, the most qualitative level of emunah is an emunah chushis, something that is a sensory, emotional connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that we actually feel God's presence in the universe and in our lives. We mentioned the Mesilas Yesharim as well. Mesilas Yesharim says that he acknowledges that it's difficult to feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in our midst, because after all, when we speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in tefillah, we don't see the Eibishter. We don't see God upon him, if you will. And therefore, we were struggling with what's the best way to be able to connect with a level of emunah chushis. Tonight, Be'ezus Hashem, I'd like to share a strategy with you that I believe will help us be able to attain a level of emunah chushis. And in order to do that, I'd like to take a look at the brachas that we make. Now, there are two main types of brachas that we say. We say a birchas nenin and a birchas hamitzvahs. The birchas nenin is the bracha that we say before we actually have pleasure, take pleasure in foods or in drinks or anything of that nature. So, for example, we make the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Bayrei Pri Hagafen before we're about to consume wine. Baruch Atah, Baruch, according to the Rashba and others, means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a breicha. Baruch is the root of the word breicha. Breicha means a source, a wellspring. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of all the blessings in the world. Because after all, if you think about it, Hashem does not need our blessings. For us to say, Baruch Atah Hashem, you are blessed, really does not make that much sense. And therefore, Baruch really represents Bereicha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the wellspring, the source. Now, we also then say, Atah Baruch, Atah. Atah, said the Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah, we're speaking directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Lashon of the Mishnah Berurah, or the Lashon of the Aruch HaShulchan is, that we're talking to Hashem, panam al panam kaviyachol. It's as if we're speaking to Hashem one-on-one, face-to-face, as it were. And therefore, says the Rashba, the fact that we're saying Baruch Atah in the Birchas Nenin, that means we're trying to connect, we're trying to recognize, to acknowledge that Hashem is in front of us. That is the level of emunah chushis. By the same token, the rest of the bracha is not a lashon that reveals Hashem's presence. It's not a lashon noichach, as the Rashba calls it. It's a lashon of nista. Nista means that Hashem is hidden. We do not see him. In fact, said the Rashba, that's why we don't make the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Shebarasa Pri Hagafen, that you created the fruit of the gofen, of the vine, of the tree. We say Bayrei Pri Hagafen, which is in third person, and that is because we have to mention that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is nister. The same thing applies with a Birchas HaMitzvah. We make the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kedishanu B'Mitzvos V'Tzivanu, and then we say whatever the mitzvah is, Lahadik Neshel Chanukah, or Likra Megillah, or to Leisha Basukah, or to Al Natilas Lulav, but whatever the mitzvah is, again, we start off with acknowledging Hashem's presence. Baruch Atah, you Hashem, Panam al Panam Kaviyachal, like the Aruch HaShulchan says. And then we get into the third person, because we do not say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kidashtanu B'Mitzvaysecha. No, we say Asher Kidashanu B'Mitzvaysecha. Third person. We do not acknowledge Hashem's presence. So although the bracha started with an acknowledgement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, which is the level of emunah chushis, the rest of the bracha is in a lashon of nisr, of hestapanim. The reason why we do that, said the Rashba, because if we initially acknowledge Hashem's presence, we don't want to make the mistake and think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like all the other creations, and therefore we say the rest of the bracha in the lashon of hestapanim. Okay, that is one pshat of the Rabbi. Then the Rabbi says another idea. The Rabbi said that there's another lesson in the way the bracha is structured. Says the Rabbi, the bracha is nigla at the beginning of the bracha, revealed Hashem's presence because mitzad ma'asav. It's true that we do not see Hashem in front of us, like the Mashiach Sharm suggests. However, we can tell, we can find HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the actions and the activities that take place in the world. We're all familiar with the story that took place in Spain. This was in 1492. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, they gave an edict that the Jews of Spain must either leave the country or die or convert. And of course, this was a terrible decree. The date, the so-called due date, and when the decree was supposed to be implemented was August 2nd, 1492. It happened to have been Tisha B'Av, and of course we all know that if something takes place on Tisha B'Av, something to that degree, it's an ominous sign of something terrible. Now, that story everybody knows. Everyone's also familiar with another story that took place in Spain, and that was that in 1492, Christopher Columbus left Spain to find the new continent called America. Perhaps many people are unaware that the deadline for the edict that the Jews must leave Spain was on August 2nd, 1492. And the very next day, August 3rd, 1492, is the day that Christopher Columbus left Spain. Isn't that remarkable? Is that a coincidence? Think about it. The place where Judaism now is able to practice a religion in America, Baruch Hashem, the chesed of the Medina, we're able to actually have religious freedom. We're able to learn Torah. We're able to have yeshivas, to have mikvahs, to have shuls. That's an unbelievable chesed. On the day after the Jews were expelled from Spain, where they had lived there for many, many years, and they thrived there, and it looked to be a terrible thing, but the very next day, the Eibishter put in motion the salvation for the Jews of the future. Said Rav Chaim Volozhin 200 years ago, he said the day will come that the pillars of European Jewry will topple, when the yeshivas will be destroyed and uprooted, said Rav Chaim Volozhin. However, they will be reborn in the exile of America, the 10th and final exile of the Torah. It's the final stop, said Rav Chaim Volozhin, of the Jewish people before the arrival of Mashiach. That's an example where we see the Yad Hashem. As the Rashba said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu niglav b'mitzad ma'asav. From the actions of the world, we are able to discern, we're able to actually see the Yad Hashem. Several years ago, I saw a remarkable quote. For me, it was a very insightful quote from an unusual source because, and I'll tell you who it was from, I don't think many people consider this person to be someone of great insight. The quote came from Leonardo Da Vinci. Now, from my Jewish education, which I'm not sure what level there really was in high school, but I had read about Leonardo da Vinci, and I knew that he was a prolific painter. What I did not know about Leonardo da Vinci, that Leonardo da Vinci was an inventor par excellence. Leonardo da Vinci was considered to be a Renaissance man. He was a universal genius. You see, Leonardo da Vinci was involved in many, many of the new inventions that took place in his day, in his time. And when they asked Leonardo da Vinci what enabled him to come up with so many inventions, he said that he always had this tremendous thirst for knowledge. He always had this tremendous imagination and curiosity. And therefore, he put it all together. He was able to find the possible from the impossible. Leonardo da Vinci also said that he classified people in 3 different groups. Group number 1, he said, there are those that always see. And he said about himself, I always see. I'm always able to see the possible in the impossible. The second type of person, said Leonardo da Vinci, are those that see, but only when they're shown something. If they're not shown, they won't be able to see it. The third type of person is someone who even when he's shown, he won't see. Leonardo da Vinci obviously was the first type. He was able to see even when not shown. I know someone who's a tremendously successful businessman. In fact, I dare say he's a billionaire. He's in real estate, and he can find distressed properties and find money and make tremendous profits from developing the properties, from selling the properties. Most people would shy away from such a property. They would say, I don't want to take a risk. There's no way I'm going to be able to make a lot of money. No, not him. He is able to figure out where the dollars are hidden. He can find the possible and the impossible. That was Leonardo da Vinci. And then there are those that even when shown, they don't even see. I mentioned last week the story with Rav Chatzkel Levenstein. Rav Chatzkel took a ride in a cab. The cab in Yerushalayim was being driven by a former army person. He was a secular Jew. And he told Rav Chatzkel the story about the time that he and his friends went up to the hills in Africa after they finished their tour of duty in the Israeli army. And one night they were woken up by the fact that one of their friends had a boa constrictor, a poisonous snake that was hanging around his friend's neck. They didn't know what to do. One of the friends said that, custom is that when a Jew is about to die, he screams out Shema Yisrael. That's exactly what his friend did. His friend yelled out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The snake slithered away. Nothing happened. It did not spew any poison, any venom, and he was able to live. So the secular cab driver tells Rav Chatzkel Levenstein, he says, my friend, he was saved by this miraculous, unbelievable fortune, good fortune. He became religious. He went right back to Eretz Yisrael, and he's currently learning in a yeshiva. So Rav Chatzkel said to him, no, and what about you? He said, no, but Rabbi, you don't understand. The story didn't happen to me. I was not the one who was saved by the miracle. I think Leonardo da Vinci would consider this individual as someone who, even when shown, doesn't see anything. Meaningless to him. It didn't happen to me. Yeah, but what about the fact that he was fully aware? He believed what happened, but he wasn't moved by that because he's the third type of person. Even when shown, it doesn't do so much. It doesn't have much of an effect. When it comes to Ruchnius, not many people are able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu even when not shown. It's a difficult thing to do. Because Olam Hazeh, the word Olam, the root of that word is Ne'elam. Ne'elam means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hidden. And the Eibishter does it purposely. Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if the Yad Hashem was so visible to everyone, then it would be a no-brainer. We would have no Bechira. If we would have no Bechira, then the reward wouldn't be as great. And therefore, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be able to gain such reward, that's the whole reason why He put us down on this earth, to be able to come closer to Him and to be able to gain Olam Haba. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hidden. That's why He's Ne'elam in this world. And therefore, that's why it's not obvious. There are some Jews that even when they don't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they see Yad Hashem. One of the names that comes to mind is Rabbi Avigdor Miller. It's well known that Rabbi Avigdor Miller always talked about how in the day-to-day mundane, we should be able to see Yad Hashem. Because according to Rabbi Miller, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was visible in everything that took place. If you take a look at all the details of all of the so-called natural things that take place, and that we are the recipient of the blessings, it's no doubt that this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu at work, said Rabbi Avigdor Miller. Rabbi Avigdor Miller used to say, then we say, Reishis Chochma Yiras Hashem. Reishis Chochma Yiras Hashem means that we're aware of the Eibishter. And that is the beginning of Chochma. And that is really the goal, the ultimate goal of every single Jew, is to be able to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Avigdor Miller used to talk about. He would talk about the mundane things that perhaps you and I take for granted. So, for example, Rabbi Avigdor Miller used to talk about the lungs. The lungs, imagine the way the lungs work, or the heart. The heart pumps blood. There's an exact rhythm. The heart muscle never gets tired. It's constantly pumping blood throughout the whole body. And this is something that takes place day in and day out. It doesn't stop for one moment. The unbelievable Chazdei Hashem that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the person. That, so to speak, the heart just pumps if you will, automatically, or at least it appears that way. But Rabbi Avigdor Miller said, no, this is all Chazdei Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu behind it. The lungs that we breathe, the lungs that help us breathe, the heart that keeps us alive. How about the feet? The feet that enables us to go anywhere we want to. We can walk, we can run, we can jump. The feet enabled us, we're not restricted to one place. We're able to walk anywhere on the planet, literally. These are tremendous brachas. Said Rabbi Avigdor Miller, it's true we benefit from those brachas. But if we would stop and think, who's the source of these blessings, we would come to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We would come to thank Hashem, and we would be thankful for all the detail that's involved. Because you know why these were created, said Rabbi Avigdor Miller? Not just so that we can benefit from these, but also so that we can see the Yad Hashem and we're able to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for being the recipient of all these remarkable blessings from Hashem. You know what Rabbi Avigdor Miller said about the eyes? Sounds a little bit funny. Rabbi Avigdor Miller, I once read that he said, the eyes represents two cameras. Imagine a person is walking around with two cameras on his face. Those two cameras are exquisite. They're remarkable. They're high tech. You walk into a dark room and the eyes adjust and you're able to see. You then walk out into the sunlight and the eyes adjust and you're able to see. You want to be able to see something that's close by? Take a look. You want to be able to see something that's far away? The eyes adjust once again. You see, the eyes are a remarkable camera. The eyes are constantly adjusting on their own. And because of that, it's an unbelievable chesed that the Eibishter did. This is something that's part of the natural day-to-day event. Rav Avigdor was able to tell that these are all Yad Hashem. Rav Avigdor Miller was in the category of, even when not shown, he was able to see. This is something that we should all strive to do, but again, it's difficult to do. It's very difficult for us to be able to see the Yad Hashem in the day-to-day events. To the story with Rabbi Yisrael Gusman. Rabbi Yisrael Gusman was one of Gedolim in Europe. He was a prodigy, and at the young age, in his late 20s, Rav Chaim Ozer asked him to serve together with him on his Bezdin. One day they were taking a walk. They were discussing a difficult shaila that came to the Bezdin. And in the middle of the discussion, Rav Chaim Ozer looks at Rav Gusman. And he says, you see those plants on the ground? Those plants can enable a person to survive for many, many days. Or you see those plants over there? Those plants can quench someone's thirst. Funny thing to say in the middle of a discussion when there's no reason to say it. Rav Gusman was unaware, really, what was the point of Rav Chaim Ozer. He didn't ask him, and he let it be the way the story unfolded. Many years ago, when Rav Gusman was older, and he had a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, he had this, I guess, I'll use the word, a hobby, if you will, that he would water the bushes and the plants around the yeshiva. Can you imagine the Rosh Yeshivas watering plants around the yeshiva building? A very unusual hobby, to say the least. So one of the Talmidim went over to Rav Gusman to ask him, hi, what's going on? Why is Rosh Yeshiva every single day watering the plants and the bushes around the yeshiva? So Rav Gusman told him a remarkable story related to the time when Rav Chaim Ozer used to show the plant to Rav Gusman. Rav Gusman said, at the time when Rav Chaim Ozer talked to me about the plants, in the middle of a discussion of a shaila that came before the Bezdin, I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what was going on. But later on, during the war, I was in the forest running away from the Nazis, and I joined the partisans to fight against the Nazis, Yimach Shema. And there were many days where we had no food to eat. And yet, almost miraculously, we came across some plants in the forest. And I said to myself, those plants look like exactly the ones that Rav Chaim Ozer would point out to me, that they could sustain a person who has no other food. Or these are the plants that can quench a person's thirst. And I said to myself, unbelievable chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This was Yad Hashem. Rav Chaim Oizer was showing me many, many years before. You know why? So that when I would be in the forest with no access to any food, and I had no way of being able to survive in the forest, Baruch Hashem, Rav Chaim Oizer showed me that these are the plants that can keep me alive. Remarkable, remarkable Yad Hashem that Rav Guzman was able to see. But again, that was Rav Avigdor Miller, and that was Rav Guzman. It's difficult to be able, because we're all so used to the cause and effect that we're also prone to. It's almost mindlessly we take a look at events and we don't even think of the Yad Hashem. So how can we get to the level that we should be able to see the Yad Hashem and to be able to develop and acquire this tremendous level of emunah chushis? So I'd like to share with you an idea, a strategy, a remarkable insight that I saw that's based on a Gemara. And Be'ezus Hashem, I hope that this strategy will be very beneficial in enabling literally everyone. We don't have to be on the level of Rav Guzman. We don't have to be at the level of Rav Avigdor Miller. Be'ezus Hashem, we can strive to get there. But perhaps if we're not on that level now, when it's difficult to be able to see Yad Hashem, to at least to be able to see Yad Hashem, or as our friend Leonardo Da Vinci said, that there's a second group of people. When they are shown, then they see. The Gemara is Masechta Brachos, Davav Amud Beis. Listen to this Gemara. Mizmo leDavid b'vacha b'vnei Avshalom b'noi. David HaMelech is being chased by his son Avshalom. Avshalom is trying to kill his father. And what did David HaMelech do? He says a Mizmo. Mizmo leDavid b'varchai, when he's running away b'vnei Avshalom b'noi, from Avshalom his son. Frak the Gemara is Mizmo leDavid. It's a Mizmo, it's a song, it's a simcha, it's not a simcha. Kina leDavid mevayalei. The Gemara said this is a lamentation. It's a terrible thing. It's a time of sadness, a sign and a time of moaning, of groaning. Why is David HaMelech saying a mizmor? Listen to what the Gemara says. Kimin she'om aloi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to David HaMelech, Hineni make him alecha ra mi beisecha. David HaMelech was being nenash, he was being punished. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu told David HaMelech, I'm going to bring a ra, something evil that's going to come from your home mi beisecha. Hayatze, David HaMelech was sad. What a terrible thing. God is telling him there's going to be something terrible, evil coming from your home. Omar, David HaMelech said, Shema Evedoi Mamzehu, Deloy Chayes Alai, he won't have any mercy, no compassion for me. That's why David HaMelech was sad. But Kivan the Chaza, the Avshalom, when David HaMelech saw that the raw, the evil that's coming from his house is not an Eved, a servant, or a Mamzer. It's his own flesh and blood, Avshalom. Sameach, he was happy. Mishimhachi Oma Mizma. That's why he said a Mizma. He sang a song. It wasn't a lamentation. Rabbi Yonis and Eifshitz, the obvious question that it should dawn on everyone. What's worse? An Eved or a Mamzeh that's trying to kill someone? Which, you think about it, it's not premeditated. Because an Eved or a Mamzeh, they may not be of the type of character that they would get along with someone. They might want to kill their master. What's worse? Is that, or is the fact that someone's flesh and blood, his own son, is trying to kill him? Can you imagine that's premeditated? I would think that David HaMelech would even be sadder when he knows that his son is trying to kill him. So what shot in the Gemara defined Kim and the Avshalomu Sameach, and therefore Mishim Hachi, that's why he said a Mizmor, a song. Said Rabbi Yonis and Eifshitz, an unbelievable explanation. Rabbi Yonis and Eifshitz said as follows. The truth is, when things happen in the world, bad things can happen. A person oftentimes chalks it up to cause and effect. For example, person has a job, he's not making enough money. He says, you know what? You know why I'm not making enough panasa? Maybe I don't have the skills. Maybe I don't have the education. Maybe I'm just not in a good job. I'm working for a bad boss. All these things are the regular, natural, day-to-day events. Or let's say your daughter couldn't get into the seminary that you wanted her to get into. You say, you know what? It's natural. It's normal. Her grades weren't up to par, and therefore she didn't get in the seminary that she wanted to. Or let's say the shidduch didn't go through. I didn't speak to the shah. I didn't speak to the right shadchan. The resume was not done in the proper way. We need to update the resume and put in better information. Or, let's say, never, somebody gets into an accident. They say, listen, they got into it. It was bad weather. I slid it on the black ice. What can I do? Said Rabbi Yonasan Eifshitz, oftentimes, when bad things happen to a person, we don't chalk it up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't see the Yad Hashem. We don't get the message that this is something we need to do tshuva. We need to get a little bit better. We need to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us. Because we chalk it up. This is the way the world works. It's teva, it's nature, it's natural. But what happens when something unusual happens? When something unusual happens, as the pasuk says, ha'adam yira le'einayim. Hey, this is not the regular, natural cause and effect. There's almost like a mechitza that separates the cause and the effect, because this is something highly unusual. Something highly unusual, said Rav Yonasan Eifshitz. It's much easier to see the Yad Hashem. Therefore, said David HaMelech, if this would have been an Eved or a Mamzer, if this would have been the usual cause and effect, he would have been sad because a bad that comes out and evil coming out of my house, I would not have chalked it up that this is Yad Hashem, the Eibishter wants something from me. I would have mindlessly perhaps overlooked it. I would not have taken the message to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing it for my own good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving me a message. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to be masakin something. He wants me to become a little bit better. He wants me to daven. He wants me to get closer. He loves me and he wants me to get closer to him. Because I chalk it up to natural cause and effect. But no, said the Gemara, Kimni Avshalom Hu. This was David HaMelech's own flesh and blood. When your own flesh and blood is coming after to kill you, you know what? That's not natural. That's not usual. That's not cause and effect. There must be something there. This must be Yad Hashem. Because only the Eibishter can cause something out of the ordinary. It's almost like something that would happen miraculously. It's not an S, but it's something that's so highly out of the ordinary. We right away say this must be God's hand. And if someone is able to see the Eibishter's hand, that's a reason to be misameach. That's right. Even if there's a bad thing that's happening, that's a reason to be misameach. I may have mentioned it last week. I had a young mother from Lakewood who called me. And she said she had a terrible situation. She found that her child was choking. And the child literally was blue in the face and stopped breathing. She called Hatzalah. Hatzalah came literally a minute later. Hatzalah said, if you would not have jumped into the room at the time that you did, if you would have waited another minute or two, then you know what? The Nebuch, who would have known if the baby would have survived? And when I asked her, what made you go into the room? She said, I don't know. I was putting up makeup in my bathroom, and I heard the child groaning, and I instinctively jumped up, and I ran into the room. That was very unusual. She was shook up. She asked me, so what should I do? I said, well, obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants something. This is very unusual. I said, this is Mizmor LeDavid B'Vacha B'nei Avshalom B'nai. I suggested that she checked her mezuzahs. I got a phone call on Thursday, a couple of days ago. She checked her mezuzahs. She was so thankful that it was Yad Hashem that got her to check the mezuzahs because the child had stopped breathing. She wasn't happy that the child stopped breathing, but she was so happy that it happened in such an unusual way that she literally decided to check the mezuzah because this is so out of the ordinary. It must be the Avish to want something. And you know what she found? Most of the mezuzahs in her apartment were puzzle. And the psul was, there was something that was puzzle in the lamids, around the neck of the lamed. I'm not saying that the neck of the child and the neck of the lamed, who am I to be able to make that connection? But the fact this was something so unusual, and then she volunteered and told me the next part of the story. That her 2-year-old had been choking on some food for a couple of weeks, and not choking that the child was blue in the face, but having difficulty swallowing. And she didn't chalk it up to anything, because that was part of the natural cause and effect. But when her child, mamish, turned blue, and she had a tremendous pachat, she said, normally I would stay in the bathroom and put on makeup. I jumped into the room, and I don't know what made me do that. And because of that, she checked her mezuzahs. You know what? Mizmo l'David b'vacha b'nei Avshalom b'nai. And the truth is, there are many, many situations in life, and it doesn't have to be a miracle. It doesn't have to be something like the story that I just related from this young mother in Lakewood. It can be any story, any situation. I'd like to share with you a story that I read about Rav Mordechai Gifter, the Rosh Hashiva of Tel Yeshiva. He was going to a chasana in the winter by plane from Cleveland. They were supposed to go to New York City to a chasana of one of his talmidim. But as it turns out, there was a terrible blizzard. He was unable to go. So the plane landed in Washington, D.C. in the airport. They landed and they had to wait in the airport, but they had to daven Ma'ariv as well. So they were standing on the side in the corner of the airport. There weren't that many people. There was a big storm that was not in Washington, but it was coming to Washington. So there were many flights that were being canceled or delayed. There were less people in the airport. They were about to start to daven Ma'ariv in the corner of the big area in the airport. One of the people who was mopping the floor came over to them and said, I have the keys to the room. If you want, I'll open up the room and you can pray. I see you're about to pray. And that's exactly what happened. He took them to the room and they all went to daven. They didn't have a minyan because they had 9 people. They davened Ma'ariv. There were no other Jews in the airport. And when they finished Ma'ariv, they noticed that the person who was mopping the floor of the airport was standing right outside the door. And they wondered, why is he looking at them davening Ma'ariv? And then a moment later, they found out. As soon as they finished Ma'ariv, this person who was mopping the floor said to Rav Gifter, why doesn't somebody say Kaddish? Rav Gifter looked at him and said, Kaddish? How do you know about Kaddish? And this person said, you see, I am a Jew. I'm not a practicing Jew. And I can barely read Hebrew. But I do know, I remember that when I was bar mitzvah, I went to the synagogue and we had the service. And I remember that people said Kaddish. And you see, he told Rav Gifter, I need to say Kaddish. Because last week I got a dream. And in the dream, my father, who died several years ago, came to me in the dream. And my father pleaded with me. My father pleaded that I should say Kaddish to save his soul in the true world where God resides. And I told my father in the dream, Daddy, but I can hardly read Hebrew. And where would I find a minyan? And my father pleaded with me. He said, look, I know you and I didn't get along, and you didn't even come to my funeral. But my soul needs to be saved. I need the merit of a Kaddish, and you're my only child and my only son. You're the only one who can help my soul. Please say Kaddish for me. And the son said, okay, I will. And I'll make you a deal. If you can provide a minyan for me, I will say Kaddish to save your soul, as a merit for your soul. And the father in the dream told him, yes, I will. I will get a minyan for you. So this person who was mopping the floor said to Reb Gifter, I am a Jew. You are 9 people and I am number 10. My father is coming through. He's keeping his part of the bargain, his part of the promise. My father kept his part of the promise. I need to keep my part of the promise. Because my part of the promise was that I promised him. If I get a hold of a minion, I will say Kaddish to save his soul. And with tears running down his cheeks, he told Rav Gifter, imagine God created this blizzard. You were going on this plane, supposed to be going to New York City, but God changed everything. The flight now had to come to Washington, D.C. at this exact moment that I am here to mop this floor. And you are here, 9 of you, to say your prayer. And I am at the right place at the right time. And you are at the right place at the right time. And this is all the hand of God. You see, when shown, it's possible, very possible to see. And we don't have to be Rav Avigdor Miller. And we don't have to be Rav Gusman. And although we might, Be'ezus Hashem, strive to get there, and we all want to get there, but we can be like this person who can barely say the words of Kaddish, who was Zoicha. He had this chus, because when he was shown, he was able to see the Yad Hashem. You know, it's not only adults. It also applies to children. Several months ago, I had a 6th grader call me up to tell me a remarkable story. It was around Pesach time, and he told me that his father went to a grocery store to buy bread, and he came home, and he put one toast in the oven, in the toaster oven, and the toast and the bread burnt. He went ahead and he took another piece of bread and put it in the toaster oven, and it burnt again. And he put a 3rd piece of bread into the toaster oven, and it burnt again. The father couldn't understand what's going on. Why does the bread keep on burning? And when his wife came down, the mother of the 6th grader, she looked at the bag of bread and she said to her husband, "Oh, why'd you buy this bag? This bag doesn't even have the right kosher symbol on it." And the 6th grader who was standing in the kitchen looked at his father and said, "Tati, isn't that remarkable? Hashem made the 3 pieces of bread burn. This is Yad Hashem, so that you should not eat from the bread did not have the right kosher symbol." When shown, we should all be able to see the Yad Hashem. So the strategy and the suggestion that I'm sharing with you this evening is, this Rabbi is right. HaKadosh Baruch Hu nigla mitzad ma'isa, when we say the Baruch Atah, the Eibusha, you are the brecha, the wellspring, the source of all the blessings. And it's true, when not shown, it's difficult to see. And we might not be someone like Rav Avigdor Miller. We also might not be someone like Rav Gusman, who's able to put 2 and 2 together to see the Yad Hashem. But for sure, when we are shown, when we see these unusual situations in life, it could be a flight that gets diverted from New York City to Washington, D.C., to enable someone whose father came to him in a dream to be able to say the Kaddish to save his father's soul. Or it could be a 6th grader who, when he sees his father trying to eat a simple piece of bread, to make toast out of it, 3 times in a row, he's saved from eating something that they felt did not have the level of kashrus that they were used to. When we see the Yad Hashem, that enables us to acquire the level of emunah chushis, because we're living with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the Eibush, the Reishis Chochma Yiras Hashem, and awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Rabbi Avigdor Miller said. Be'ezus Hashem, let's all notice these situations, and it could be anything. If it's unusual, it's not the typical cause and effect. That means we're zoicha to be able to have the golden opportunity to see the Yad Hashem in action. Like the Rabbi says in the lesson of the bracha, that the bracha starts with a lesson of noichach to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, panam al panam kaviyachol, like the Aruch HaShulchan says when we say Baruch Atah and Shemona Esrei, we say Atah 33 times. With zoicha to be able to speak directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's true the Meshulas Yisorim said it's difficult to see Hashem. But like the Rabbi says, no, we're able to see the Yad Hashem. How? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's nigla mitzat maisa. Next time we say Baruch Atah, stop for a moment, pause, think. We're talking directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is very much in our world. And then that's chus, when we say Baruch Atah, we'll be zoicha, to start to acquire the level of emunah chushis that will enable us to elevate our tefillahs, to empower our prayer, to be able to be zoicha, to have segulais, and to have Yeshuas and the Chomots, and to be able to bring the Geula. Thank you very much for listening. I want to remind everyone, Be'ezus Hashem, every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the 5-minute clip. Look for it on Torah Anytime. And Chazaq, thank you very much for listening. Be Matzliach.